Okay, hello everyone. Welcome and thank you for joining us at the University of California, Irvine for today's presentation of The Intersection, Woke Black Folk. UC Irvine campus is located on the homelands of the Ahakemen and Tongva peoples, who in the face of ongoing settler colonialism continue to claim their place and act as stewards of their ancestral lands as they have for the past 8,000 years. My name is Zachary Price, and I am an assistant professor of doctoral studies in the Department of Drama, as well as African American Studies. This performance presentation is part of the UC PhD Spring Speaker Series, as well as the inaugural event for Black Arts and Black Publics, which is an interdisciplinary research, creative, and pedagogical platform that we are developing in the Claire Trevor School of the Arts. In the spirit of interdisciplinarity, I want to acknowledge our collaborators whom have made today's event possible: Illuminations, the Chancellor's Arts and Cultures Initiative, the Vice Chancellor for Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion, and the Office of Inclusive Excellence, the Humanities Equity Advisor, the Arts Equity Advisor, and the Department of Drama, of course. We are in an elegiac moment. It is now the end of April 2021, and we are challenged with continuing to teach, learn, and do research under the conditions of a pandemic. Over 500,000 people in the US are dead, and globally, almost 3 million people are dead. Many more continue to suffer in a multiplicity of ways. And while the spring offers some glimmer of hope, the situation with COVID-19 and its variants remains fluid. How can we move on and get back to normal when there has not been an opportunity to acknowledge the trauma, rupture, break, pain, death, and illness that has occurred? More specifically, how can we ponder the normal when it was the normative that resulted in Black Americans having disproportionately suffered during this pandemic? The conditions which created the inequitable access to healthcare and access to safe and healthy living and working conditions did not start in 2020, 2016, 1968, or even 1898, but are rooted in the earliest formations of the American colonies. So the mission of Black Arts and Black Publics is a response to these conditions. Through research, pedagogy, creative practice, and community engagement, Black Arts and Black Publics is a platform dedicated to exploring, organizing, sustaining, and disseminating information around Black artistic, cultural, and political practice. BAPP organizes and connects students, faculty, and community members at the University of California with individuals and institutions such as theaters, museums, nonprofit arts organizations, public, civic, and government entities, artistic residencies, as well as tech and entertainment entities. BAPP promotes creative practice and community engagement through an array of performance modalities that include, but are not limited to, critical performance ethnography and choreography, archival work, oral history, symposia, exhibitions, play readings and performances, installations, lectures, and curated discussions, all of which focus on creating a public sphere that embraces and promotes Black life and Black thriving. So our guest today, Funmilola Fagbamila, is a Nigerian American playwright, actress, and professor. Her current project, entitled The Intersection, Woke Black Folk, is a stage play on the complexities of Black political identity and a story about how humans navigate difference. This project has been met with critical acclaim by thinkers and artists such as Angela Davis and Erykah Badu. It premiered to a sold-out house at the Pan-African Film and Arts Festival in Los Angeles, and as the featured theatrical production in March 2018, and once again staged to a sold-out house at the Skirball Cultural Center in LA in 2019. Having recently completed an international tour of the Intersection In venues across England, France, the Netherlands, and Brazil, the production has staged virtually for the 2021 academic year. Funmilola currently serves as a professor of Pan-African Studies at California State, Los Angeles. As one of the original organizers of the Black Lives Matter movement, Funmilola contributed to the organization's inception in 2013 and served as the arts and culture director for years following. In 2015, Funmilola was honored by the United States Congress and the Black Community Clergy and Labor Alliance for her commendable activist scholarship and service. In 2017, Professor Fagbamila was awarded the inaugural activist in residence position at the Institute on Inequality and Democracy at UCLA Luskin. And in 2018, Amplify Africa and the US Congress honored Funmilola once more with the African Excellence Award in the field of education. Funmilola's viral poem, Black Girl Fly, has been viewed more than 3 million times. And in 2021, the TNT network reached out to collaborate with Funmilola on a national feature for the piece. Her work as a playwright and scholar was featured in a 2018 Netflix original documentary, and her writing, political analyses, and social commentary have been featured in publications such as The Guardian, Now This, News, and NPR. In November 2017, Cal State LA hosted a public dialogue between Funmilola and the Oni of Ife, traditional ruler of the Yoruba kingdom, Ile Ife. In September 2018, Funmilola and Nigerian presidential candidate Omoyele Sowore participated in a public dialogue on the state of affairs in Nigeria and the African diaspora. And in February 2020, Funmilola traveled to Paris at the request of the president of France in order to offer her consultation in France's plan to address the country's colonial history with African nations. This came to fruition after President Emmanuel Macron had viewed Funmilola's social commentary and political analysis in the popular French publication Le Monde. Funmilola has delivered keynote addresses, lectures, and performances at universities across the US and Europe. Some of the venues include UCLA School of Law, Oxford University, Stanford, and Harvard. I have been working and collaborating with Funmilola for almost a decade, and I am truly honored to host her as the inaugural speaker for Black arts and Black publics. And I look forward to continued collaboration with her here at UCI. Please make sure that you join us for the Q&A and discussion immediately following the performance of the intersection Woke Black Folk. Please make sure you keep your mics muted and your screens off until the Q&A. Thank you so much for joining us.
Okay. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be in the world. I'm so grateful to be here. I hope that you all can see me and hear me. I think you can. So again, I'm grateful to be here. Thank you to Professor Price. Thank you to Professor Willoughby Herard. Thank you to Stephanie Lynn and everyone that has helped to make this event happen. As Zachary mentioned, as Professor Price mentioned, we've known each other for many years and been creatively collaborating. And so this is a beautiful kind of full circle moment, if you will. Now, whenever I kind of hear folks reflect on my bio or present my biography, it makes me think about the importance of remembering why we're grounded in this work, which is to understand that we will do what is necessary for Black people to be able to live free, happy, healthy lives within this society, within this country, and within the world. And then also to remember that aside from any accolades or accomplishments, what I genuinely believe in my heart, in my spirit, is that human beings should have access to what they need. When we are talking about food, water, shelter, education, I am a proponent of human beings having access to what they need in this life. So really at the core of it, what you're about to witness is me presenting an abridged version of my stage play. So a type of spoken word piece, if you will. And if you really listen to the heart of the piece, it's questioning what we understand as truth, how we deal with nuance, how we deal with complexity, what we do with the task of emotional intelligence in our liberation movements, in a world that has, how you can say, centered intellect and not placed such an importance on the level of emotional intelligence necessary to actually shift the structures that are in place that we seek to shift. And so I say all of that to say that I'm going to give you a brief look into my stage play, The Intersection Woke Black Folk, where you will meet 4 different Black characters, people that I know very personally, and you all may know them as well. Disclaimer, these characters are interesting people with interestingly controversial perspectives. So there may be some different and or triggering things that are said. Bear with me, it'll make sense in the end. So I'm gonna begin like this, if you all don't mind. All right. And feel free, if you desire, to chat with each other in the chat box as we begin this conversation, because this dialogue is a conversation of sorts. So I have a question for you all. First is, who's woke? Like, who's woke? You woke? Me? Yeah, I've been woke. I stays woke. Some of y'all don't really hear what I'm talking about. Woke. W-O-K-E. Adjective. Definition. Aware. Knowledgeable about what's happening in your communities and in the world, with the ability and willingness to assess and critique how social, political, and economic systems of oppression operate at macro and micro levels. Now that we're on the same page. So I was walking one day and I met a Black man and he seemed rather woke. He had an ankh around his neck, a scent of nag champa, incense, smoke. He said to me, "Queen, sister, mother of the earth, Black girl, let me treat you like goddess. Let me come into your world." Said he's equipped with the knowledge and he's got all the facts about the stolen history and all the good that came from Blacks. He's talking math and science and physical equations that they claim to have created after pillaging our nations. Black men say, if we are to win, then first we have to look within. And really, if we're gonna fight, then first we have to reunite. And really, if it's gonna work, then we gotta drop all this bullshit. You see, this European influence on us, he's not cool with. He says this gay, queer, homosexual agenda ploy to effeminize the Black male. But no, he never will surrender. Black man, Black woman, Black child. Very simple. See, it's this white woman's feminism always getting in the middle. And I can't stand these academics, obnoxious Black feminists, well-read, very angry, and probably in need of a therapist. Maybe some green juice as well, to clean out the system. They eating swine and dairy and other foreign organisms, going to white man's school to acquire a degree so you can get you some prestige and earn a living salary, but we don't need no recognition from the white man, you see? This man believes entirely in African divinity. I say, okay, Black man, but really, what you trying to say? Said that he's woke and he's willing and wants freedom for Black people today. I say, okay, and I keep walking. And so I keep walking. Well, then I come across a Black woman reading book. She says to me, gender binaries are an illusion and patriarchy is indeed a crook. Says she looks forward to the day when all Black lives will matter, including queer and trans and those deemed unworthy of chatter, no conversation about the plight of those who remain invisible, like Black women and girls and those for whom a gendered category is simply inapplicable. She's fed up. Tired of explaining all the time how her sexuality is not aligned with your feminine divine. She tells me, look, how are Black people to prevail when we are ideologically trapped in this damn dusty hotep hell, reproducing the very systems that once stripped us of humanity? Fake deeps, the hoteps, the epitome of anti-intellectuality. She sighs from exhaustion, then returns to her book, then says her dissertation looks at how Black patriarchy cooks up the intra-racial conflict that impedes liberation. And if we could just deal with complexity, that'd be means for celebration. She takes a sip from her mug, then proceeds to explain, that it's very important that we as Black people in academia speak and write in ways that are accessible to Black people outside of these spaces. We must fully reject any form of academic elitist exclusivity. And further, we must acknowledge that the differentiation of radical alterities is conducive to the conceptual logic of a truly advantageous and inclusive Black liberatory praxis. I say, okay, but really, Black woman, what you trying to say? Said that she's woke and she's willing and wants freedom for Black people today. I say, okay, and I keep walking. And I keep walking. Well, then I come across a man who seeks to implement a plan with a loudspeaker in his hand. He says, it is our duty to fight, like it is our duty to win, like we must protect one another and we must love one another. I say, okay, Black man, what are we protesting today? He says, they always shoot us down, and every time they get away. They get away with it. No consequence at all, but we won't take it lying down. Nah, let's keep going, y'all. They said, Black lives matter. Then they said again, Black lives matter. Then the cops came. Black lives matter. You're gonna have to move. Black lives matter. Now I'm warning you. Black lives matter. Sir, you're under arrest. Black lives matter. Black lives matter. Black lives matter. It's now a few hours later. He was in and out of jail fast. Intimidation tactics. He says he's used to being harassed. You know, I catch a lot of flack for all the work that I do. Black people calling me extreme. I'm out here fighting for you. Academics say we don't have a thought through plan, sitting in that ivory tower with a book in your hand. Don't get me started on these internet activists today. Don't come to not one of the meetings, but got everything to say on Facebook. Typing from the comfort of your seat. Black people out here dying and you gonna sit at home and tweet, running your mouth about everything we are not doing right, right? The ones that are on the ground with our bodies in plain sight. Ain't it a shame? Y'all good for talking, talk all night and day, but y'all scared of revolution. What the last poet say? Right. I say, okay, Black man, but really what you trying to say? Said that he's woke and he's willing and wants freedom for Black people today. I say, okay, and I keep walking. And I keep walking. And I keep walking. Well, then I come across a Black woman on her phone. She says she wishes these Black radicals would just leave the shit alone. They're making things worse. I mean, really. How much can we complain? We did have a Black man in the White House. Look how much we have gained. And I mean, yes, racism's real. I get that part. But do you think you're going to change the world if all you do is bark? Just bark about every single thing that doesn't go your way with your bullhorn and your picket sign. What really will you change? And yes, I understand that you demand basic civility, but when? When are we going to talk about Black accountability? We have to address our part in the matter, and if we don't, then we're setting ourselves up for disaster. Pull your pants up, respect yourself, and maybe then you'll get respect. We have to do better at keeping each other in check. We kill each other, then focus our attention on police. The approach is counterproductive, and quite frankly, it's obsolete, and we must shift our energy. How negative can we be if all we ever think about is bad things, then we manifest that? You see, I was reading this book the other day, and it literally said exactly what I always say. You attract what you think about the most, you know? And if we think more progressively, more positively, then it will be so. But when I express how I feel, Black people call me a coon. but I just want what's best for us, and I want it soon. I say, okay, Black woman, but really what you trying to say? Said that she's woke and she's willing and wants freedom for Black people today. I say, okay, and I keep walking. So I took you on a trip with me. We met 4 Black folks with 4 different ways of thinking, but they all call themselves woke. Who's really woke? Character 1, with a juice the color green, and a politic that demeans those he doesn't see as kings and queens. Or character 2, the academic, who stands up for the ones most invisible, but speaks in a language we can't all understand, an excess of syllables. Or character 3, the activist, always on the front line, but criticizes those who resist online. Or character 4, respectability politicking for sure, but still wants us to be all right. How will these 4 people unite? That's what it takes. No one cast away, nobody left behind, right? Not even the most problematic kind. See, we cannot reproduce the force that tried to kill us off. Because if we do, I'm telling you, we'll have to pay a real cost. Look, what I'm saying is quite simple. We cannot throw each other away. We are complex and conflicted, often stuck in our ways. But regardless of all that, we're absolutely here to stay. So let's teach one another and be open to receive, because we really need each other. This is a fact, guaranteed. Thank you. Okay. Now, what you all just witnessed is a brief look into the 4 characters that I present in my stage play. And you can pull up your videos and you can, and so we can see each other now. We can pull up your videos and we can jump right into our discussion. I know that there was a lot of information right there. Thank you. I see some claps. I can't see all of you, but I see a few of you. Thank you. Now, I will say this. Why, before we jump into the Q&A, why did I write that piece? I wrote this piece years ago and it eventually became the stage play, The Intersection Woke Black Folk. But why did I write it? I wrote the piece many years ago because I knew these people very personally. I understood that their intention was to be helpful in the movement toward self-determination and justice for Black people in this country and beyond. But they had vastly different perspectives about how to bring that about. And I saw in these different communities, and they are in different Black communities, that each community would speak despicably negatively about the other community because they assumed that the other communities were less intelligent and or dumb. And what I wanted to bring to light is that they all present complex truths. And if you pay close attention, they're all problematic in their own ways, but they are all quite sure that they are right. So what we oftentimes find in liberation movements, in movements toward a more liberated and healthy, just and egalitarian society, that coalition building is possible, but oftentimes a very strained and difficult effort because oftentimes we're bringing in people with different philosophies, but with a similar goal, and they tend to not be in community with one another. Now, this is one thing that I must present a disclaimer before we get into conversation. Am I asking for people that have, how you can say, a kind of nuanced intersectional analysis of the world to be in conversation and community with folks that hold potentially patriarchal, potentially heteronormative, and possibly homophobic and transphobic and potentially other bigoted ideologies, and to put these people in community with one another and tell them that they have to be in collaboration in order for justice? Not necessarily. I always explain that there's a difference between someone who is open to learning, who is open to being in community with others, versus folks that just want to believe what they want to believe because they want to believe it in order to maintain whatever sense of peace or power or privilege that they might have access to because they have the perspective or analysis that they have. So there are those that are willing to shift and learn and grow and be in collaboration. And then there are those who, where it is as if you are talking to a brick wall. They do not want to change because they are comfortable in their disposition, because they gain something from it. So I always have to clarify that, because when I say we need each other, well-intentioned, good-hearted people that desire to change the world for the better need each other to move forward. And they won't always have the same perspectives and ideologies. It is just not possible because humans are too complex for us to think the same. And the goal is not for us to think the same. The goal is for us to respect each other in our individualities and to present a world where we are all free to be and have what we need. Does this make sense what I'm saying? Aha, I see a few thumbs up. Okay, so we're gonna get into conversation. Yes, I think that Professor Price might have a question, and then we can, and please, folks, I'm gonna see if I can see you all. Maybe I can change the view where I can see you all. And then I want you all to chat with me about anything that came to mind while you were hearing me perform. Do you know these people? Have you been in conversation with these characters? How have they been in conversation with you? How have they judged you? How are you them? Right? How are you those characters? How are your parents and your family members and your communities those characters? How have those characters harmed you and devalued you, right? Or devalued or harmed someone you know, right? And I say all of that to say that these characters are nuanced. I know them because I am them. Maybe I have, my philosophy is a little bit more aligned with one or two of them now, but let's not get too crazy. But you understand what I'm saying? But I know them, and the reason that I wrote about them is because they dismiss each other and they need each other at the same time. Are we in an understanding of this? Yes. Okay, so let's jump into it.
First of all, let me just say thank you so much, Funmilola, for that presentation performance. I guess my first question just revolves around the idea of performance as a healing act and as a recuperative act and a restorative act. And I'm wondering if you can just maybe say a little bit about what do you, or what can one, or what can people collectively gain through creative art and performance, but also from your experiences and from where we are now, what are some of the obstacles that you see, some of the impediments, and what would be some of the hints, what would be some of the suggestions that you would offer for confronting those challenges?
Yes. Immediately what comes to mind is when you talk about the healing capacity of the arts is this piece, and what I've been able to write creatively in my life and present creatively has allowed for me to free myself of so much of the frustration that I held about the things that I couldn't express with just normal word, normal dialogue. It was not going to translate the same way. So if I just say, hey, you all, we all think differently, and it's important that we love each other, that's very easily dismissible, because there are people in this world that do real harm, and whether it be physically, psychologically, infrastructurally, institutionally, those who have the power to inform the perspectives, and then even the policy that informs our everyday lives. So it's so dismissible for me to say, you know, you all, we all think so differently, and it's important for us to love each other. And you all know this, that when people say those things, we tend to dismiss them. Am I right or am I wrong, right? Where it's kind of just like, all right, this person is not understanding the nuances of how power works under the institutions that essentially govern our lives. And so instead of me saying what kind of on a surface level was on my heart, I knew on a deeper level that if I can present people to themselves, then they have no choice but to look at themselves through the characters and observe their own, how you can say, their own ideological conflicts and hypocrisy, and their glory at the same time, and their truths and their genius and their intelligence, because we're nuanced. And that's exactly what happened. And I want to tell you the truth. When I first wrote this poetry piece, which started off as a poem a few years ago, I was silently terrified that Black people would be, my community, would be upset with me for talking about the things that we don't talk about publicly, that we don't talk about out loud, especially not 4 years ago, right? It's just now being more of a nuanced conversation about the real kind of intricacies of complexity of identity that exists within Black communities, because we once lived under a culture that said that we cannot present our nuance and our conflict of ideology because we have to present a united front to address white supremacy, right? To address institutional racial violence. And so I'm sitting here thinking, but that's not even possible. When I tell you it's not even possible for us to do that transformational institutional work until we deal with, in many regards, some of the nuances that are happening in the Black community in terms of how we engage one another. Why? Because Black folks, and I'm gonna go ahead and say this from my own opinion, and I can't say this as a fact, from my own opinion and understanding, Black people are most invested in combating anti-Blackness. Everyone else is allies, right? But in terms of lived reality, Black people tend to be most invested. And there are those that are not invested because of their own financial and personal social gain. And you all understand what I'm saying when I say that as well. That has existed from the time that Black folks have been on this land. But without going too far, the healing capacity is to say truths that are not sayable, that are not articulated in the same way through typical normative dialogue. I needed to tell this story, and I know that folks wouldn't understand until I presented themselves to themselves and said, let's take a look at this, right? So that we might have the possibility of transforming the world in the ways that we say that we desire to. And to understand that it's not about figuring out who agrees with you and then finding your group and then sticking to that. It's creating an understanding across more and more people that we have to respect each other regardless of our dispositions. But particularly if your disposition is not enacting or or causing harm to anyone else. Is this making sense what I'm saying? These are the people that we want to be in collaboration and in, how you can say, coalition with, is those whose ideologies are ones that are rooted in love and the understanding that everybody should have mutual respect. What are some of the challenges to what exactly? Because you asked about the challenges. The challenges to what? Because we're in a moment where there are great challenges in terms of, I believe, in the theater world, because as you all know, and I can see all of you now, our work oftentimes feeds off of being in person, being together in a space, and dealing with the energy of the conversation in person. And now here we are, screen to screen, trying to create that same energy between us, and we can do what we can, and we pivot and we shift accordingly. But that's one of the challenges of the challenges of 2020, 2021, which we're getting through and which we're making it through. Challenges, can I say the word challenges? Challenges the challenges are plenty, but the possibilities are more.
Okay, I think that really is a really great way of articulating that the possibilities are more. Some folks had their hands up. Professor Willoughby Herard.
Thank you so much, Funmilola. This was an incredible kind of mini presentation. I really, really appreciate you being here and the care with which you bring to a conversation about healing. I really love that you talk about the kind of complexity of Black communities, and that Black movements and Black communities themselves are coalitional spaces, right? So when we think of coalition politics, we tend to think like of various racial ethnic groups getting together and forget that Black communities themselves, that's an intentional, deliberate coalitional space that people are claiming.
Correct.
So I have a question about intelligence and this presumption that the other group doesn't have any thinking capacity, or they're dumb. And that's how they came to that, so I'm curious if you would say a little bit more about that. And since I have the floor, I'm going to ask the other question about what kind of role do we have as college educators for training? And what kind of role do we have as college educators and college educators in training in how to support Black communities getting free? Like, what is our role cited in the university? None of us are only in the university, but this is mostly, a university audience.
Yes. What is intelligence? What is intelligence exactly? Because when we really think about that, information that we've been exposed to, facts, the idea that it can be backed by a logic, right? Or backed by science, or the hypothesis is valid. But so much of what we call intelligence or knowledge is informed by just simply what we're exposed to, a perspective that we're exposed to, that we receive as truth or consensus, right? And what you find is that in different communities across the world, that like the consensus about what is truth varies and shifts greatly. That's why you can have one country look at another country's, or one culture look at another culture's way of being, belief systems, practices, and be like, that is so strange. It's just so different. And not even just view it as different, but some type of deviation from normal, or deviation from a objective truth, when it's just kind of like, who told us what is that truth, right? And so I think that when I say intelligence, we know that there are some things that can be backed, meaning that there are data, there's stats, there's resources, and rather research and logic that informs a certain idea or perspective that we can receive as a type of intelligence and or a truth. But I also present the idea of challenging the complexity of truth. Why? Because we oversimplify nuanced truths, right? We oversimplify nuanced truths for the sake of making a narrative consumable. Especially in 2020, 2021, in this social media era that we live in, where we need to make the title of the article very clickable. It needs to be within 140 characters. So oftentimes what happens is a kind of ideological oversimplification that can cause harm as well. And what I find is that, and if in this piece that I presented today is a very small piece of what in the entire production you see is that each character presents an oversimplification of something that is potentially true, right? But because they've oversimplified it, it's nearly false. And so does that make sense what I'm saying? Am I breaking down? And so that's really what I'm talking about. I'm trying to think of an example of an oversimplification. For instance, you know, if character 2, the academic, the Black radical feminist academic, who I understand her very much because I am her and I was her and I've been her and I know her and she's my close friends and I know this person, right? And she's devoted her life to having people understand the urgency of understanding how intersecting oppressions function and how if we are going to get free, that we all have to get free of all of these systems and not just one of them, that you can't just somehow address racism without addressing the ways in which capitalism enacts such a violence upon so many of our lives and the ways that patriarchy functions and the ways that a kind of a heteronormative society functions. Like, she understands that you can't do one without doing the others. But while this person is right, she also assumes that the character number 1 with a patriarchal leaning ideology who believes that queerness is for white people and is a European ideal that Black people took on as a traumatic outgrowth of slavery. This is what character number 1 believes a lot, and she assumes that this person is just simply dumb and that they are not as deep as her because this person hasn't had access to the same information as her that she was privileged to receive within academia, that she was privileged enough to go read bell hooks and go read about the Combahee River Collective and to go read Kimberly Crenshaw and to go read Michelle Foucault and to go read Sidia. It's interesting because the understanding that there's a classism and an elitism that exists there that she doesn't even acknowledge because she's worried about protecting her identity and those who are similar to her, without acknowledging that person, that the systems that you seek to dismantle, you often can embody in your assumption that those that don't have the same information as you are dumb, and not just simply not having access to the same information that you have. I know that was a lot. Bear with me. I know that was a lot. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and the great thing about having, I think, this post-show discussion is providing space and time to process collectively together. And so this is also, I think, an important part of the work. Chanru Lee.
Hi, thank you so much for your powerful performance, Dr. Fagbamila. I really appreciate your call for dissolving boundaries. You're calling for us to dwell on the contradictions, the paradox. the things that don't quite make sense, the nuances in the, to stay in the gray area longer and to just listen. I want to follow up on Dr. Willoughby Harass's question, but I want to contextualize her question within the context of PhD, because I'm a PhD student. And to follow up on that question, the previous question, I want to ask, so I'm trying to engage with different communities in and through my work. And in your performance, you also talk about making your work accessible to the communities. I just wish if you can say a little bit more on that. Yeah, thank you so much.
Oh, yes, of course. Thank you for being here. Making the work accessible to the community. So I think the only time that I mentioned that in the piece was that the second character, who is the radical Black feminist academic, her name is Tanavu, and she says, you know, we must make our work accessible to the communities that are not in academia, or essentially, what are we doing? Are we here to just talk to each other? Right. And I remember, and I'll have a very transparent moment with you all. I remember in grad school, in my master's program, having that moment where I went, because I was trained and used to a kind of academic environment that was also had one foot always in the community outside of academia. So I'm talking about literally our part of our curriculum would be to show up to resistance spaces in the community. And so I'm coming from that in my undergraduate environment to grad school, where I'm feeling like we are literally just here talking to other academics about things that only other academics can understand, because we have language in academia that is not the same language that is used outside of academia. Are we understanding? Are you all here understanding me when I say yes? And so I went, and again, a transparent moment, I that class that day, we had a break in the middle of that class. And I went to the bathroom, just like everybody went and got some water or got their snack. And I went to the bathroom and I sat in the stall and I cried, because I wondered whether or not it made sense for me to be here. Because I was just like, I don't understand this. Like, I've only ever experienced scholarship that is supposed to, like the purpose of it is supposed to be able to get us to understand what is necessary to do what we have to do within the community, not just for us to be here and be smart and be brilliant for each other, right? Like, I was just like, what? Like, I can't even take what we are addressing in this class and use it to help in any way, shape, or form the people in my community understand, because the language, the pedagogy is so distant from what they would be able to even conceive, because we have a culture and a language in academia. And so I cried, because I was just like, what am I gonna do here? Like, this is not how can I make this helpful instead of just being here to be smart? You know, I don't need that. I don't need that. And so then I wiped my tears, went back to class and acted like I wasn't crying, completed the task, and realized by the end of my first year in grad school that I was there to receive the information that I can use and I can translate it, you know, and make it useful for the community. I don't have to wait for academia to do that for me or to make that easier for me. It wasn't set up with the intention. Academia was not set up with the intention to be a liberatory body, if you will, right? It was set up very exclusively. And there are still many remnants of that exist within academia, even with all of the profound, dynamic, liberatory work that's being done by individuals within academia. Still, the institutions themselves were not set up to prepare us for revolution, right? They weren't. The idea is to prepare us to be brilliant and to have brilliant careers, right? And to change, to challenge ideas, but to not do too much, right? Because then you'll lose your tenure. And so, or you never get tenure, rather. And so, why am I saying all of this? Because your question was, kind of like speak more about the accessibility. I say all of that to give you all the background that like I sat with this, and I struggled with it. I struggled with it emotionally until I understood that academia is a beautiful tool to gain access to the information that you as an individual can use to translate to an effort that can affect the communities inside and outside of these spaces. And so I said, I believe that I wouldn't have been able to write this piece that has helped people to heal, has helped people to think through our hypocrisy, our nuance, our brilliance, our glory. I don't think I would have been able to write it without, I know I wouldn't have been able to write it without the information that I was exposed to in my very beautiful, brilliant master's program in my community there, with the scholars and the professors that so lovingly took me and taught me about things that I didn't know, so that I might take that and make it helpful in whatever ways that I can. So how can we do more of that? Just thinking through how, like literally thinking, because we all have individual efforts. Yes, we need to come together in many regards, but we have individual efforts. So we can sit with ourselves and say, how can we take what we know and what we have and make it helpful at the very baseline, right? At the very baseline. I think that kind of gets to what you're talking about, because there's no like big grand scheme of like, this is exactly how you do it. I don't think that's a black and white thing. As an individual, you think through, what do I know? What do I have access to? How can I make this more helpful than me just being smart and getting in my career?
Thank you so much, Dr. Fagbamila. Love you.
Thank you so much for your question. I love you too.
Professor K-Track had a question, and then we will get to Professor Lai, who I saw was raising her hand. Professor K-Track writes, I want to ask if your work is inspired at all by Anna Deavere Smith's work and what is sometimes called documentary theater.
Oh my goodness. My heart just like smiled so big right now, because that just brought me all the way back to the beginning of this, when I was a first year grad student at UCLA, and Professor Price was there, teaching and engaging with the students. And back then, many years ago, I sat with the professor that I was TAing for that semester, and he literally was like character number one. And this is a professor of history, right? This is a historian, right, at UCLA. And so let me not say too much now, but but like, y'all remember what character number one, that energy, right? That kind of the deeply patriarchal tone and the implications that were there. And I remember how that showed up a little bit in his presentations and in his lectures. Not a whole lot, but a little bit. And I would be sitting there fuming, right? Because I'm TAing this class. So I'm like, what am I supposed to do with this? Like, he is inaccurate and he's teaching them something that is wrong, and the students are writing it down as if it is fact. Because you think about it, undergraduates, a lot of the times they're just open books, they're just sponges. A lot of the time they just teach me, I want to take it in. And of course they have their own intellect, but they're just open, they want you to feed them, so they're writing it down as if it's law. So I'm fuming because I'm just like, he's teaching them something that is nuanced and he's giving them an oversimplification. I sit with him to explain to him. The whole semester, him and I were back and forth. I'm like, no, that's not right. No, this is like, he didn't have a nuanced gender analysis. He finally, toward the end of the semester, told me, and I promise this gets somewhere. He finally, toward the end of the semester, told me, Funmilola, like, I want to tell you the truth. That's not my area of expertise. Like, I just don't know anything about it. He just told the truth finally, you know, I just don't know anything about it. And so and I told him, I was like, then don't teach what you don't know. You as professors, you have to be able to say when you don't know. You got to be able to say when you don't know. So what does this have to do with Anna Devere Smith? I loved that professor, even though him and I were different. Understand the point of the play. Even though him and I were different, I understood that his intention was to begin to understand and to shift and to change. Many people would say, oh, this man, he's ridiculous. You know, he's just a patriarchal, just nonsensical person. Like, get him out of here. He shouldn't be teaching. But I knew that he had the willingness to learn and change and be open to something different to what he knew, as I am too. So I sat down with him one day, and I having a meeting with him, and I told him I have an idea about all of these things that we've been talking about, the different ideologies that exist within the Black community, and how oftentimes they're never in conversation with each other, and it prevents us from doing the coalition work necessary toward pushing forward the movement for Black lives. And he says, and I explained to him what I have an idea of, and he says, that sounds like a play. That sounds like a play to me. And I was like, you damn right it's a play, you know? And there was birthed my identity as a playwright. I literally probably started referring to myself as a playwright like a few days after that. I had not written a play in my life. And I was like, yes, I am a playwright. Playwright Fagbamila, sounds good to me. And so I started researching and getting into my work. And one of the people that I came across as I worked toward building my theater piece and realizing that much of it was going to be presented as a one-woman show was I found Anna Devere Smith, and I was deeply transformed by what she's been able to accomplish in terms of addressing the nuance and the complexity of humanness via a one-person show. So much of what I've learned and what I do and what I know was inspired by Anna Devere Smith. That was a long way to say that.
But important, nonetheless. Professor Lay.
Hi, thank you so much for your presentation and for your performance and all the intelligence and all the wisdom. And then should I call this maybe woke performing art? Well, I mean, I'm just saying, well, for instance, thinking about that as a category.
Oh, here you are. Forgive me. Yeah. I needed to find your
yeah.
Look at your face as you were saying.
Yeah, so I'm thinking about that. Let's say if I call this a woke performing art, and I know, of course, there's a long history and, you know, and all that. I'm curious about what you think about the trajectory of this type of art, both for yourself in terms of style, in terms of methods, and, you know, Ketu mentioned Anna Devere Smith, so it's sort of documentary based or impersonation of other people. I'm just curious about why you see this developing, both for yourself and for just in general, the trend of this kind of art. And then I guess also to think about what would be most effective in terms of style.
That's interesting. You know, I've never had this question. Thank you for this question. I view it as an ethnographic work, right? When I was in grad school, I was also studying it within the sociology department, because that was my co-department, if you will, or co-parent department, however we identify it as. And I was researching as an ethnographer. And so that also informed why I went about this route, which is I'm in these communities, I'm listening to what is being said firsthand, I blend in anywhere I go, right? So so folks are comfortable telling me their truth, because I also present a disposition in a genuine, true disposition that I wasn't judging them, whatever they were gonna say, I was just gonna listen. and hear and understand, and sometimes respond and sometimes not respond, but always respond truthfully. And so it's a type of, so when I hear you asking about this style of doing things, what I view it as, and what I view what Anna Devere Smith did, even though we're kind of identifying it as like a documentary style, what she did was a type of ethnography, a literal ethnography, where she would go and research and write down and record verbatim what the people would say, and then speak verbatim what the people would say to her when she was interviewing them, and then presenting nuanced dialogues about certain topics in society. Really brilliant. But what I have done is I just take broadly what I know these characters and these communities believe and make it rhyme. So I hope that one day you all can see the full performance, and then you'll see that the whole thing is in rhyme. So you're going to be like, is she rapping? Like, the whole thing is in rhyme. And so I made it in some ways a bit of a musical, and you can see, you will see that there's a lot more musical elements. And so where do I see this way, this style, this trajectory going? I think it probably will become more common. I don't think it's very common. I don't think it's very common at all. I mean, or let me say this. I think it's common within our kind of like a more intimate, creative theater, and then oftentimes theater academic spaces, right? But then outside of that, in communities outside of like intimate theater networks and academia, I don't think it's very common on what would be considered like a mainstream scale. The people that I've seen on a mainstream scale is Anna Devere Smith and Sarah Jones. Do you all know who I'm talking about? I think it's Sarah Jones, right? And I haven't seen that many folks. I think it will become more popular because I think that people will see that it gives us an opportunity to talk about really uncomfortable things without having to present yourself, because that's also what prevents us from talking about uncomfortable things that we need to talk about, is we don't want to present ourselves. I don't want to say, I hear Funmilola Fagbamila would like to talk about the nuances of how, character number one has violently, damaged my understanding of myself, but is still, this person is also my uncle, and they're my dad too, and it hurts my heart, but I need to talk about it because I love this person, but their ideology is very harmful to me. And character number 4 is a neoliberal, and they think that they are woke, but it is not really going to move toward justice in the society. They're conflating nuanced ideas, and that person is my mom, and it hurts me, but I love her. You understand what I'm saying? Like, we don't want to do that because that's very vulnerable. So if I just put it in a play, we could talk about it, right? And so I hope that answers your question.
Thank you.
Yes, Tara.
Thank you. Thank you so much for giving us all of this and spending time with us. This sort of follows exactly what you were just saying. I was so moved during the piece by the sort of shift back and forth between your characterizations and the photographs. And I mean, I had like, I could write a whole thing about this already. Like, there's so much going on there, but I was really struck by the way in which the photographs are so loving.
My goodness.
And
yeah,
they direct us to, and they help us to see each of these 4 sort of like types.
Yes.
As the full people that you are giving to us. And so I was just, I mean, as I have so much, but what was your process for choosing the photos? And, we, I mean, and, there are a lot of people here from like theater studies backgrounds, like photos have such a history of type. And indeed like stereotype, right? And there's a really specific sort of technological history there. But here in your piece, they serve as sort of the counterbalance to type. And so I'm curious about how much you engage with photos in all of your work, and then also really your process for selecting them for this.
Oh my goodness, such an interesting question. I so love that you mentioned that the photos seem to be warm, like they seem to be loving in a very kind of like I don't know, very challenging piece in a way, because and the funny thing is like that the intention wasn't necessarily for it to be warm, even just for it to be like, look, here are the humans. Here are the humans that you have made into caricatures. Here are the humans that we oversimplify as dumb or ridiculous or I'm talking about the most degrading words that we use towards each other, where someone with more conservative leaning ideals refers to somebody who is more left leaning as a libtard, right? And how, within Black feminist intersectional spaces that I occupy, the ways in which we refer to character number one as a hotep, right? And that's a term that we use like almost kind of like comedically, but also in a derogatory term to say like this person is just like literally has never read a book in their life. They found all of the information that they have on YouTube. Like it is, and we know what it implies. And then even like the third character who is basically saying like, we're out here on the streets doing this work and y'all say that, we don't have really a plan and we're just doing things and we're extreme. And then you see the photos like this is just somebody who wants justice by any means. And so, but somebody might fix their lips to call somebody extreme for having the audacity to do whatever is necessary for Black people to live. Like what are we dealing with? And so what I find is that these humans, they're all right and they're all wrong at the same time because we are nuanced, right? And so I'm like, look at the pictures. They're real. They're people that you know, and a lot of them are well-intentioned, right? A lot of them are well-intentioned. So let us stop with the idea that we have to figure out for particularly those who of us who have the same and similar goals in this world in terms of having a more just, loving society, that we can only identify, empathize, and be in conversation with those who are just like us. It won't get us anywhere. And I know what I'm saying is it's not sexy. It's not the modern thing to say. It's not the easiest thing, but it is the truth. And I know that, truth is nuanced, but there are some basic fundamental truths that we've seen what humans have done to even the planet because of our own egos and wanting to be right. Oh no. Global warming. Oh no. Climate change. Oh no. What we've done to each other because we need to be right instead of being evolved, kind to each other, better to each other. We're more invested in being right than we are in being whole. Ooh, I done gave a sermon. Now, I done gave a sermon. I didn't even mean to do it. Let me bring it back. Okay. Now, but I think it's that we are all in understanding here of this. Like you all see it, you feel it, you know it. And we struggle to watch the news because we know that so much of it is preventable. If humans come to a different space, intellectually and emotionally, but nobody wants to talk about it because it's just not sexy. It's just not sexy. We have a lot of healing work to do. And so even though this piece is talking about the complexity of Blackness, at the core of it, it is humans that need to shift. And once we shift, the institutions will have no choice but to shift. We govern them and we decide what these institutions will look like. There are people in positions of power that can be removed or they can change too. Child, we done went to church, and then we done went to, I don't know where we done went, but we done went somewhere. Oh my goodness. I feel like we having a healing revelation. Am I the only one?
You're not the only one.
I have feelings in my heart that are arising.
Professor Cynthia Basham says, and no one wants to be the first to show their belly. And I think that's so important to think about how the challenge of being any individual who wants to speak to a community, be with a community, also necessitates being vulnerable. Right?
My gosh.
That's really the scary part of it. All right. Mm-hmm. Can you take the leap to open yourself up, to expose yourself, and recognize that that's really where I think a certain level of restorative power is. But let me stop talking. Professor Lee.
Yes, Professor Lee, please.
Oh, okay. Actually, I see my colleagues Cynthia and Joe are here. And the drama department, we are actually trying to right now, like we have met a few times in a little committee, trying to kind of tackle the institution of white American theater and trying to see what we can do. Of course, we are not Broadway, we don't have all that kind of things, but then what we could do in our theater department, or thinking about theater in academia in general, which is essentially a very white institution. So I just wonder whether, Cynthia and Joe want to say something about it, or if you, Funmilola, if you have any advice for us.
Okay, in terms of, I want to make sure I can see everyone. Okay, in terms of the way in which American theater, still just white American theater, and the ever-present, the omnipresence of kind of like this culture of whiteness still within American theater, right? It makes me think of, it makes me think of a lot of what August Wilson like spoke about publicly, in terms of critiquing the number of theaters that only deal with white narratives, and how like there's a few, I'm talking about a few, like sprinklets of Black theaters that exist, and there's more now. But we think about how August Wilson was talking about this. I think this speech was like 1992 that he presented, where he's talking about how essentially the institutions addressing white narratives and presenting them as objective, as universal, as a reflection of kind of everybody's lived reality. And that every time there was a piece that was specifically about communities of color, Black life, Asian life, Native American life, Indigenous life, if you will, that it was like an interestingly different ethnic alternative reality, but that whiteness was objective. And so I already know that you all have broken this down already in your work, and that you've looked at this, and we know that this is a culture that is present not only within theater, but then a number of different cultural spaces. So what to do is to continue to disrupt. Like what else to do other than what we've been doing? And then we can think about what more we can do other than what we've been doing, which is to create our narratives, to disrupt the spaces that present white narratives as universal, and then also present our own stories, the complexity of our lives, and to not allow for our stories to only be stereotyped. One thing that it reminds me of what Alice Walker said. She was in conversation, I think, with Sonia Sanchez, and Alice Walker, she says, It's as if the world assumes that Black people are always somewhere picketing and protesting something, always at all times, as if we are not full human beings with nuanced lives and goals and love and beauty and fun and all of these things, right? You, Professor Willoughby Harari, understands what I'm saying. And so, like, we are not at all, it's not even the stereotype that exists when we do get to present our narratives, right? Finally, we've carved out space for ourselves within white American theater culture. We've carved out space for ourselves. And then the only stories that get to be told are of Black trauma and death, because we are only ever dying, never living. And what we do is we come in and we disrupt all of those narratives to present our full humanity. Like, you're not gonna just make the one Black theater piece that you decide to present this year only about Black death to teach your white audiences about how we die and how we should all feel bad about that and how we should do what's necessary to change that. No, we can talk about that and address all of it, address our glory, address our laughter, address our fun too, address our whole humanity, address our complexity. We got stuff going on in our families just like any other community does too. So when we really want to challenge anti-Blackness within theater, what we have to do is present the wholeness of Blackness, right? The wholeness of our identities. Because part of anti-Blackness is the assumption that Black people are not whole and fully human. And so the part of the counter to that is to present the fullness of Black life. And we see more and more narratives happening, mainstream television, et cetera. It's changed a great deal within the last few years. And of course, amidst that, there's still so much work to do. So we push forward with that mission.
And I will add that it's not just the wholeness, it's also the, I guess the integration, it's actually part of the whole us, right? It's not separate but equal, right? Because we often see that kind of situation. I'm talking about specifically, for instance, in theater. It's not just like I have a season of, in general, white theater, and then we have this extra, which is about whatever, right? So always think about that as alternative, as exist in a separate space.
Correct.
Right, but not part of the whole us, right? Everyone. Yeah. So.
Yes. As if Black American theater is somehow a deviation from American theater, right? It is the American experience, right? As opposed to a deviation from the land of the free, home of the brave, if you will. I'm being facetious. Oh, this country. Anyways, that's a whole other story. But yes, this has been so good. I know that we only have like 3 minutes left. I'm just so grateful for you all. This has been more than I could have asked for. Just really good, really great conversation, really great questions, a lot of questions that I've never gotten before. And it makes me think through more of how to do this work better and to not feel fatigued. And if I do feel fatigued, to take the rest that I need and then to push forward. Because there are times, and I know that you all can understand this, where you just kind of question, is it working? And I've sat with, the questions around like, is our creative forces, do they do what we desire them to do? Because I've been around people that are movement veterans, you understand me? Respected movement veterans that have said things as antagonistic as like, oh yeah, like that cute arts stuff that y'all do over there, as if it's not significant, or as if it doesn't shift anything. It's cute, like, oh, you're gonna do a poem about Blacks, oh, it's cute, right? And then and they do that until they see a piece that transforms them. They do that until they see a piece that transforms them, and then they see a piece that transforms people, and then you see what the power of art is. Like, we all know it here in this space. Not everybody knows it, but we know it. And so we remind ourselves like this thing that we're doing here is very powerful if we decide to make it powerful. And when we get fatigued and when those narratives come to our mind of if it's really even working, if it's really even worth it, let it pass and proceed with your work.
I need to
Thank
make some
you all.
noise. Yes.
Thank y'all so much. So wonderful, so wonderful, so wonderful. Thank you, Professor Price, for all of your work with this. I'm so excited about how this initiative will build. It's going to be a beautiful thing. Thank you, Professor Willoughby Herard. I appreciate you deeply for all of your assistance. Stephanie Lim, I appreciate you for all of your assistance. Everyone on the chat, we had a good conversation. And so hopefully there will be more. We're trying to see what we can do about potentially meeting in person one day. We'll see what happens. But when that day comes, I'll be grateful so that we can learn together. Thank you all so much. I want you to have a beautiful day. Professor Price, anything?
No, we're at time. So I want to make sure that people are able to go on to their next Zoom meeting probably. But again, thank you, Funmilola, for joining us. Thank you all for joining this call on behalf of the Department of Drama and the Claire Trevor School of the Arts and University of California, Irvine. We'll see you next time. Thank you again.